Now Fiddler. Puts on the step, goes right through, puts on the step again. Oh, go Freddie. That was magnificent stuff. Well, they shall not believe them. Marshall skips away, Marshall's still going. Mullins opens up again. Oh, look at him go. He beats O'Davis on the outside.
Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of The Voluntary Tackle, the only NRL podcast prepared to invest in its own breast milk thick shake company. I'm your host, Damon Brown, and today on the show we'll be discussing all of the shit show that was Magic Round, plus a whole lot more, obviously. But first, I'm joined in the Sports Best Friends studio by Xander Risotto and Media Watch Mario on the panel. Welcome, lads.
Good to be here, mate. It's magical.
Feels magical, doesn't it? I almost feel a little bit Harry Potterish, even though I've never read any of the books or seen any of the movies.
There's just a tad controversy in the media at the moment.
Oh, Ray Warren in the house with the controversy.
You're right, mate. The timing is perfect, and again, we should just act as though that's intentional and it's not just a case of us not being able to get our collective shit together, because it just feels good if we say we deliberately ride the wave of controversy. But you know what I'm really concerned about is the fact that, you know, I've just told you guys that I have my own breast milk thick shake company and nobody's bothered to ask me about it. Is it profitable? Why have you done it? Nothing.
I just assume that you're inspired by the kind of stuff Gwyneth Paltrow offers, and you're trying to, put out the voluntary tackle version.
I've actually thought about that, Mario, because, obviously, the moment I heard that Gwyneth Paltrow had a candle that smelt like a vagina, I thought, wow, what a commercial winner. How can the TVT do the same? And obviously, I don't know if you know this, but this breast milk, it is TVT branded. It'll be a profit share. The profit will eventually get down to you guys, a bit like trickle-down economics. It won't happen straight away, or if ever.
So just out of curiosity, who's this breast milk smoothie targeted at in the market? Because I have heard, I have a number of friends who have had kids now, including yourself, but that there are women making thousands of dollars selling their excess breast milk to bodybuilders because that's a thing.
No particular target market. I just knew there was a bit of a surplus of breast milk in the house, and I thought, outside of putting the odd shot in my Earl Grey tea, I need to get some kind of side hustle going. As they say, 9 out of 10 dairy perverts can't be wrong. Something Mario revealed just before we went to air was quite interesting. It was medical, Mario, and being the kind of rugby league podcast that we are, and this is completely up to you whether or not you want to reveal it, obviously, but can you let the listeners know what you've been doing this week?
Well, I've been feeling a little bit down this week because, as I may or may not have mentioned, I have a marathon coming up in a few weeks' time, which will be my first time doing it. And, lots of very hard training for that, et cetera, et cetera. The problem was I went and scheduled myself a vasectomy for Friday just gone. And then I find out that, I can't run for a week. And 3 weeks out from a marathon, that's not ideal training.
Mate, can I ask you this? When you're scheduling your diary and you thought, okay, I'm going to do the marathon on the Sunday, I think I could squeeze the vasectomy in on the Saturday. Did you think, just from a purely scheduling point of view, that was a bad idea?
Had I thought about it, if you're crediting me for advanced thinking, then absolutely. But the reality is I had been, meaning to schedule this for some time, kept forgetting. So I just rang them up and said, when's your date? They said, oh, that's the date we can do. I said, okay, lock me in. And didn't give it much thought. Also, didn't think it was going to affect my running. I thought maybe the first day I couldn't run and that would be okay. Oops.
Out of curiosity, because I'm hoping this is still a few years away from me, but was it painful?
The word you'd use, I'd say, would be uncomfortable rather than painful. It was never, unless you're really, really shit scared of needles, 3 needles in the old fella is probably not the greatest thing you're ever going to experience, but it wasn't that bad. It was just, awkward. And I'm not really a fan of having everything, flashing out for a doctor and a nurse to be playing with. It felt rather awkward.
Just to jump in there, I mean, if they're playing with it, I think you may not have gone to a medical clinic. I think that might have been a Thai massage parlor.
It's more how it felt from my point of view. What they were actually doing, I tried not to look.
I think Zed is quite on the money there. If you must go down the lane of having a vasectomy, I would have thought at least you'd have a hooker do it. Probably just to take a bit of the edge off it, not a male physician. But I don't know if it's the right thing to do, mate. But congratulations. I don't know if that's kosher to congratulate someone who's had a vasectomy, but well done, more power to you. And yeah, mazel tov. Let's leave it with that. But look, I'm probably stretching the the patience of our listeners a little bit because they're here for rugby league, and guys, there can be no other thing to talk about than Magic Round. As Xander alluded to earlier, it was slightly controversial. The PVL mandate to cut down on high tackles has caused a fair bit of a stir. I was trying to think of the right way to sort of broach this, and I thought we'd just start with this question first up. Was this the right way to go about limiting concussions? And was choosing the showpiece round of Magic Round the right time to make the push?
So there is some context here. In answer to your first question, this appears to be a tried and true, I suppose, approach to limiting contact to the head. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but they've obviously trialled out across rugby union about 4 or 5 years ago now, in the exact same way. But in terms of whether or not it should have been done on Magic Round, apparently this was meant to be rolled out earlier. It's just that the referees weren't implementing it. So basically, HQ just said, look, after the stuff ups with officiating the last couple of weeks, particularly the Eels Roosters game, and the shocking images that came from that, they basically just put the hammer down and they said it's now or never. And in a sense, I think they were probably taking the view that, this is a round that gets a lot of attention. And for the market they're trying to reach, the people who think the game's too rough, maybe it was a good opportunity.
So you think that it was actually quite deliberate? It wasn't a case of serendipity. It was, let's wait for probably the most high-profile round outside. No,
that's not what I said. I said they've been trying to do this for several weeks and they've been ignored. And the last week was the straw that broke the camel's back, and they pushed it hard this week. I don't think they were worried that this would be a bad time to do it because it's a high-profile event. I thought that they would have seen this as well. This could actually work in their favor. I think there was some serendipity there, but I don't think it was, let's do it specifically on Magic Round. Like I said, they've been trying to do this for a little while.
Now, I want to sort of hold you to that. So when you say they've been trying to do it for a little while, what was stopping them?
The referees weren't implementing it. That's why they sacked the video officials in the game against the Roosters, is that they'd given them an edict that they needed to come down on these sorts of things. And if you listen to the reporting in the papers, Michael Chammas and others, they have said that basically they weren't getting the results from the officials, and that resulted in them elevating it and basically making it much harsher and much more black and white, because the old culture of the officialdom wasn't reflecting the will of HQ.
But, when you say the referees...
And that's how you saw a ridiculous situation that you had with the Tedesco knocks and, 20 minutes of deliberation before they could come to a decision. Yeah, that was what caused this.
So you're saying it's a deliberate reaction to a singular event?
Yeah, it's a loss of patience.
So when you say the referees aren't implementing it, though, that was one set of referees and one video ref who had a howler in one match. I feel like it's tough to sort of categorize that. There's been a few. So the view is during a round. There's been a view.
No, you're missing the point. There was a view that this was a particularly egregious incident, but that there had been a cascading and a growing number of confusion over who should be sin-binned and sent off for what, and that they needed to make a snap decision to make it clear what the directive was. It wasn't, there's one bunch of guys who've stuffed up. They basically had collected data and said, this is a bigger problem than just this game. This game has just made it the most pronounced. We need to make a decision that makes it clear this is what's happened.
Well, Mario, look, I'll bring you in here, mate, but surely the way I'm reading that is hasn't it been evidence around for a long time, not just out of that one round, that concussion is a problem and that high tackles are a problem. It would seem weird to me to implement this round on the basis of one incident in one game.
I think it was indeed very deliberate, they're bringing it in for Magic Round. I mean, I'm not denying anything that Xander has just said, but I would actually suggest they brought it in because they knew full well, based on the lineups and the way the rounds had gone so far, that there wasn't going to be more than one or two interesting games, and they were going to be blowouts. So to distract from the fact that the quality of the football was shit, they'll just, have perfect round for the crackdown, and with the added benefits of, potentially new markets seeing it for the first time and thinking, oh, good on these people for, being responsible.
I don't think that's how they view it, though. I don't think they're like, oh, this is going to be a bunch of shit games. Let's roll it out now. I don't think that's how they view it in the decision-making circles. I do think it was one of those things. You don't want to read too much into it and think of conspiracies. I think it's literally just a cascading of decision makers and people who, obviously, this has been a trend since the start of the year. We've seen more sin bins this year than most years, and this is just the logical conclusion of it. As you said, Eamon, like, they've known this has been a problem for a while, and Trent Robinson in particular has been a crusader on the inconsistencies and the difficulty the game has had in adjudicating high contacts. And he talked earlier in the year explicitly about how the game was in a weird place where they're kind of stuck between, where they used to be and where rugby union had gotten to.
Well, I guess my big question here is, obviously, I think we're all in agreement that, there has to be more done to prevent concussion and long-term brain injury. But why not, if we've known about this for a while, why not have done this pre-season? Why did I see Peter V'landys so adamant and so forthright in interviews following Magic Round and defending the position of the welfare of the games players, but clearly have had anything in place along these lines pre-season? Is this just been a sudden epiphany? That's my point, right? Like, the point is, and this is what the reporting has been saying, is that in the off season they did make a decision that they wanted to come down harder on high contact. They've just been, and it's been a fault of the league. They didn't come down hard enough, and the kind of softly approach with the referees that you need to you need to apply the rules more strictly here and there, clearly wasn't being done in a way that was consistent, and there hadn't been a clear enough directive. And so they just got to a point where, there were enough embarrassing incidents where they just had to go 1990s and take a hard line. What were the embarrassing incidents? I'd obviously know about the Roosters, the Hutch incident and Tedesco. I haven't noticed necessarily.
Well, the Kafusi incident earlier in the year on Madison, that was a huge embarrassment. Like, that was another big data point. Kafusi, that should have gone to the bin. But
Xander, he hardly got punished for that. He went through judiciary.
Well, that's the point.
So, but if you're saying they've had this, but you're saying the game had this view pre-season, that's happened in during the season, and they haven't come down hard on it at the judiciary. So
and it's again, like, that's the point. Is it that the people they've had in the judiciary and that the entire system just hasn't worked? They've obviously had a view, and I think this is partially just the function of the way head office works and the way it communicates with these bodies is it's just not that efficient. And they've obviously they've had a view that's come through, and if you've any time you work in a complex system with established people, there are going to be people who'll sort of look at those directives and go, that was still soft contact, and they'll keep pushing the old way until they're forced to do it a different way. And that's how I think it's happened.
Yeah. Well, Murray, I'll put it to you this way, that if Xander's right and the NRL have sat down and said pre-season, we really want to get serious about this, and it's just been a failing of comms and really, I guess, the frailties of the organisation. PVL's been doing the rounds saying, I sent an email 2 weeks ago to coaches and clubs, so they should have known about this. But I'm thinking to myself, an email a fortnight ago? I mean, this is a fairly seismic change in trajectory in the way that the game is officiated. Surely this deserved more than an email. It required a briefing in person across the code in a uniform way to drill into everyone what course the game is going to take. If Wayne Bennett, for example, he probably is not even on email.
Interestingly, though, Bennett is one of the ones that isn't complaining that much about it, though, right? Interestingly, him and Robbo were both pretty sanguine.
No, I actually thought Bennett was way more critical than Robbo was more philosophical.
It's really such a tough one, isn't it? The thing is, I don't. PVL has had this sort of habit of just doing knee-jerk reactions to things based on imaginary online polls and stuff. So I can't pretend to understand what's going on in his head with all of this, but I like the crackdown. I think it's been implemented 99% right. And honestly, I was just glad to see it. In the end, I'm not that fussed about the minutiae of it and why it was done or the timing, as long as it's being done, because it's a thing that needs to happen in the game. It does. You mentioned the Kafusi hit from earlier this year on Ryan Madison, and it absolutely pisses me off that yet again on the weekend, everyone gets sin binned, everyone gets sent off, everyone gets put on a report. Somehow Kafusi does the same goddamn.
Yeah, it's a fair point, actually. Yeah, the exact same.
He gets away with it scot-free. What the hell? The guy is basically Josh Maguire. He's got a long and storied history of being a grub, and yet he gets away with it. And I don't understand it. I'm glad Josh Maguire didn't get away with it, but I'm pissed off that Kafusi did.
You know, Murray, as a Manly fan, I'd love to get your take on this. I thought the same thing, that there were some dubious decisions of getting people off the field for some pretty minor stuff, but there was also some pretty major stuff missed. I thought that Jordan Ricky, I mean, it wasn't missed, but, you know, that headbutt on Morgan Harper, for me, that was a send-off. To me, that was one of the most dangerous things that happened on the weekend. It was deliberate. It landed, and I thought the proof was in the pudding, because that Morgan Harper guy seems like the most placid, nicest person in the world. You know, he's the kind of guy, when someone gets knocked off their feet, he comes and helps them up. But he was fucking pissed off after that. And that was absolutely deliberate. And he headbutted him flush on the chin. He got a sin bin. And guess what he's got in the judiciary? He's got a fine for that. Yeah. That's where it's bullshit. I mean, if you're going to come down on it and be consistent, to me, a flush hit in the head is a flush hit in the head.
Yeah, I agree. And I didn't understand that, much like the Kafusi one. I straight up just didn't understand what the refs were thinking on that, and why there's nothing being done about it afterwards, really. I think, did he get a week or something, did I see?
He got 2 weeks for the crusher, because he did two things in the game, but he got a fine for the headbutt. I mean,
I gotcha. Yeah.
Like, unbelievable. Headbutts, we should know. That's up there with squirrel gripping. Like, that's something from the 1960s that we haven't accepted that for a long time. You know, people say bring back the biff. No one says bring back the fucking Liverpool kiss. But it seems to have got under the radar. So hopefully, as you know, many have pointed out, it's a teething period, and you know, there's probably going to be a more consistency from this round on. But Xander, I wanted to get your take on this. Outside of the concussion issue, just as a rugby league fan, how did you see Magic Round in terms of a spectacle? Did it affect your enjoyment of the games at all?
No, it didn't. I really enjoyed the round. Like, I'm with Mario on this. I think there were obviously some inconsistencies here and there, but under the circumstances, I thought it was fine. And as I said, like, I went through this 4 years ago watching Union. They implemented the exact same protocol, and there was the exact same response. In fact, I was also one of the people who got really shitty at the time. But over the last 4 years, you've seen, tackling techniques adjust. You've seen a lot less sin bins and send-offs, yellow and red cards. And you've just seen the game adjust. And I think it's one of those things that it's always, it was extremely jarring, because they chose the 2019 Rugby World Cup to really go all hard out on it. They'd started in the Lions series before, but the World Cup, they went full on, and they were sin binning and sending, yellow and red carding players left, right, centre. They even bloody yellow carded. Similar to what happened on the weekend, they yellow carded one Wallabies winger for running forcefully with his elbow, just trying to palm a bloke off, which is sort of what happened. I can't remember which game it was again, but they brought a play back after a try had been scored, and judged that there was a player running too forcefully with his elbow. So it's like it is deja vu for me, and I've kind of come. I think I've made my peace with it in Union at this point. So I was pretty sanguine as a result when I saw it in the NRL.
So that's interesting. So your feeling is that it's going to level out, and eventually the behaviour will adjust, and we will get back some semblance of the game we had before Magic Round. But it's interesting you say that it didn't actually hamper your enjoyment of Magic Round anyway.
Well, yeah, like I said, the responses that everyone else was having, I'd kind of, a little bit like the 5 stages of grief. I'd been through all that already, so I was just enjoying the footy. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's probably, that would have been a. I've been watching the game with that lens for a little while, thinking that'd be a sin bin in rugby, that'd be a send off in rugby, and and obviously it barely gets a penalty, and I'm like, oh well, this is just this is kind of contact sports. We're all going to head down this road now, basically. So I was just watching it more with a sense of curiosity in that sense.
Yeah, interesting. How did you guys feel about the instances where there was a player ducking into a tackle, or there was at least, some mitigating circumstances for the tacklers, i.e. when they were bumping up off the ball and going into the bottom of the neck and the chin? Did you feel that those instances that people should be sent to the sin bin, as some of them were on the weekend, or are you happy enough for that to be the standard, that even in cases where it really wasn't, it was fairly I say unavoidable in terms of there's obviously always ways that you can adjust your behavior, but it was a sheer physics thing and zero intent, and there wasn't a lot of contact. Were you guys still happy to see people sent to the sin bin for those ones?
Oh, look, with that Tedesco one, there wasn't many calls that I was unhappy with on the weekend, but that was one.
Yeah.
I mean,
because he was running at knee level, basically, wasn't he?
Yeah. And the Roosters did the right thing. I totally have no problem with them taking him off, gaming the system to get a free interchange. Totally fine. I hope that my coach would be smart enough to do that. I have my doubts. But it should not have even been a penalty, because literally everybody watching could see that there was nothing whatsoever the player could do. You get in trouble for swinging arms, but you get in trouble for not swinging your arms when you're hit with the shoulder. So this guy, was he in trouble for swinging the arm? Was he in trouble for not swinging the arm? He got hit in the pec, basically, by Tedesco's head. There's absolutely nothing he could have done to avoid tackling him the way he did, apart from simply not tackle him. And that one annoyed me. I hope that they'll listen to what people say about that and get it right next time. I believe they will. There's still going to be mistakes. Hopefully they're few and far between. I don't mind them erring on the side of sin bin, but a send-off should be, you've got to be sure of it. I think that one was a send-off, wasn't it? And that was way over the top.
I'm trying to think. He got sin bin, didn't he?
It was a sin bin. Yeah, it was a sin bin.
It was still over the top, but at least it's only a sin bin. So that's what I mean. It's not the end of the world if you sin bin someone. So get the send-offs right, and that's the most important thing, I think. And I want to see 1 or 2 send-offs every week for a while, because I think that that's a good thing. Let's take the issue of player safety seriously and show that we are. I've got an absolutely wild idea for what might help the referees make the right calls. Why don't we have 2 referees? I know, shocking suggestion. Sorry, I should be shot for suggesting it.
Yeah, and look, I don't know if you've seen the data online, Mario, doing the rounds this week, but flying in the face of a lot of what PVL is saying is that there was the relationship of 2 referees and the minimisation of injuries, i.e. a lot more foul play picked up, a lot more keeping the ruck cleaner, so it's less sloppy, less likely to have those sort of misfirings of contact. That's quite interesting in the light of day, isn't it? That, that decision was made, I think, at the time for what was labelled a financial decision, but it may have actually had a health repercussion as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes sense. Thinking about it does make sense.
Do you think now with the new framing that PVL could be open to actually reinstating a second referee again?
It's hard to see. I think he's a really stubborn fella, and it's hard to see it happening. So I frankly don't see it happening. I don't see them coming back anytime soon anyway. I hope it will one day, but I don't think soon.
Now, just to open up the conversation a little bit more broadly, Xander, obviously this is all about player welfare. Outside of policing high tackles and actually changing behaviour on the field, what other areas do you reckon the NRL should look at in terms of actually improving that picture? Are there other areas of the game on or off the field where we could see less instances of foul play, less instances of high contact and concussion?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, off the field, you're talking about in terms of practicing and training.
Well, yeah, it could be practicing and training, or it could be workshops, it could be kids' participation, it could be anything.
So Peter Sterling actually made an interesting observation that back in the sort of 60s and 70s, legs tackling was more the norm. but that you were given time to get back at marker. But now, of course, there's a real disincentive to make a legs tackle, because you basically just allow a quick play the ball, because speed is the key thing they want to incentivize. So perhaps it's something where they, I hate to say tweak the rules again, but you try and incentivize legs tackles. This could be opening another can of worms, but allowing players to get back to marker, or having a bit more of a leeway, maybe slowing the game down a little bit because it's pretty fucking fast. But just adding an incentive for a legs tackle. But you know what I mean though. Like there's, it's not like they need to speed it up more. So maybe something that pulls it back a little bit, incentivizes a safer tackling technique, isn't such a bad idea.
I actually don't hate the idea, but Mario, I just can't see the words coming out of PVL's mouth, slowing the game down, not after everything that he's done to engineer the opposite. But could we see leg tackles again, Mario? Could that be a return to the 1960s? I know when I was growing up, not that I was in the 1960s, obviously, but even when I was playing mod footy, it was always tackle around the legs even then. I'm talking about in the 1990s. So it doesn't feel like it's actually ancient history. I know it's a weird picture, but could you see NRL first grade players going back to that kind of tackle as a primary system tackle?
I mean, it just needs to happen. It just doesn't make sense to me, and has never, that we reward one type of tackle but punish another type. And a legs tackle is a good tackle, so why punish them for doing it? We're forcing the wrestle and therefore slowing the game down by saying a legs tackle is punished automatically. So therefore, when the option's there, you must have two players in the tackle. Why not open it up to legs tackles by not punishing them, and then maybe we won't have so many gang tackles, and maybe that would, bizarrely speed the game up a little bit, because you wouldn't have multiple players tackling at once. I don't know, maybe it's just a thought. I just would like to see that. I just don't see it happening.
You create more second phase play as well, because offloads would be easier, which wouldn't be a bad thing. It's attractive footy to watch, right?
Yeah, I'd say yes and no. I'd say yes and no with that, because obviously that, there are, if you ever watch the old Toyota Cup games, they're kind of interesting to watch. But, when someone wins 58-42, I don't know how often I could watch a game like that. But, ironically, when I think of this is only anecdotal, this is not hard data, obviously, but when I think about the sort of bad head knocks growing up watching the game, they were in leg tackles. Quite a few of those are in leg tackles. So I guess you're looking at someone running with high knees, for example. It's easy to get that wrong. You either hit a hip or a knee into the head. I'm actually not convinced that leg tackles alone aren't any less dangerous than hitting a player anywhere else. So, especially when you're the tackler. And this is an interesting point.
Yeah, that'd be the tackler being the one injured. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the tackler, and you'd know this, Xander. Someone like Jake Friend, who had a lot of head knocks, even Boyd, they weren't all done when they had the ball. A lot of the time.
Yeah, well, Boyd's last one in Origin was him hitting a hip. Yeah,
exactly. So, if this is about, remember this, keeping this frame of player welfare, there need to be more done for the actual policing of tackling style as well, not just the welfare of the ball carrier, but the welfare of the tackler, whether they know it or not. If a player is using a style that's, inevitably going to be doing something that's sort of detrimental to their own health, maybe the NRL could also look at and examine that as well. I know it sounds a bit counterintuitive, but there could potentially be penalties for players that use poor technique.
How do we do that? Like, how many refs do we need to possibly be policing that? I think you can try and encourage the coaches to, teach one certain style, but ultimately coaches, especially someone like Robbo, he doesn't want his players injured. So he's not going to coach his players to do stuff that's going to injure them, that injure their own, people don't mind injuring other players, but they don't want to injure their own team. I think that's a universal thing.
Yep. It could be a case of the NRL puts a mandatory number of games that you miss, if you've had a head knock. So regardless of whether or not you're the ball carrier or the tackler, there's going to be a disincentive to do it because you're going to miss games.
Or maybe a mandatory HIA, they see anything hit your head, even if you don't go down and look hurt, you have to go off for an HIA. Even that would probably disincentivize it because, you might get a free interchange, but only, in theory, but if it's a good play, you don't want them going off for 15 minutes. You don't want Teddy or Tommy off for 15 minutes of a game.
That's right. And it does strike me that we are only really looking at half of the equation.
Yeah.
When we realize that so many concussions actually happen when you're the defender.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. Technique and particularly players tackling and hitting the point of players' hips or shoulders, or bumping into another player's head in a gang tackle. You see a lot of concussions that way. And there is an element there of there just are some head knocks that will just inevitably be a lot harder to get out of the game for that reason, because it is a collision contact sport that is pretty brutal at times, and you can't erase miscalculation completely. But I suppose what you can do is try and cut down on the careless, dangerous stuff as much as possible.
Yeah. I mean, what did you guys make of the comments from guys like Trent Barrett, Ricky Stewart, Todd Payton? They all were pretty critical of the way that the game was policed during Magic Round. And
three coaches who are not winning games, just putting it out there.
Yeah,
although I mean, Ricky's got bigger problems than the concussion changes. I think he needs to get a team that can win a second half of football.
What about the comment that Trent said about the game becoming OzTag? Are we running a risk that we're actually making a too seismic change in trajectory here in terms of what the game looks like? Xander, you said before that, you get a lot more offloads of leg tackles, for example, which would be a good thing. But I pause at that. I don't know if necessarily getting the equilibrium too far out of whack between attack and defense is a good thing.
Yeah. I just said it before, but, I think they're a little hysterical at this point. They're all coaches of teams who are doing incredibly poorly. And that's a fact. And as I said, I've seen this happening in Union, and the game is not, turned into OzTag or touch football. It's still a contact sport. The game is just adjusted. So it'll adjust.
The pejorative thing that you'd hear over the last couple of years, whenever there was a soft penalty given, was this isn't fucking rugby union. Is rugby union, in your mind, Xander, a good advert for the way that their game has approached these kind of tackles, or has the game lost something, but it had to lose something? It had to concede ground in the interests of player health?
Oh, I wouldn't. But I think Union's also a victim of the fact that it's a very poorly run sport in Australia, at least. The rest of the world, it's not so bad. And I think it's not just high tackles, but it's also just the range of technical penalties that seem to be proliferating. So that's a sort of slightly separate discussion, but it's still an enjoyable sport to watch. If you enjoy rugby union, it's not been destroyed by this change, and I think Mario's right when he said it's probably necessary. I mean, the NRL is not the NFL. We can't afford to go, to effectively have a series of class action lawsuits with what is known, I suppose, about concussion and is continuing to be uncovered. So, I mean, you can sign, you can get players to sign waivers and all kinds of things, but those things don't always stand up. And, longer term, you're going to just completely deplete your playing stocks because there'll be less and less people wanting to play it. So I think the game just has to adapt. And I think that's the decision that rugby came to worldwide, as they saw what was happening with the NFL. They paid billions of dollars in one settlement, which won't be their last. And they just realized that there needed to be a change of course so that you at least are putting in all best efforts to minimize danger to players.
I personally think this is actually the number one reason why PVL has made the changes, but maybe it explains actually why he's done it towards the middle of the year as opposed to pre-season, because the threat of litigation is so strong. And reading the tea leaves, I think there are rumblings of a collection of players in their 40s and 50s who are gearing up to make an illegal assault on the NRL. I don't know the names, but it has been referenced by 3 or 4 former players who know the players and know that it's happening. So I do wonder if PVL's got wind of that and has said, all right, we need to make a a real public statement, which would explain why maybe doing it on Magic Round, to say that the game is, at least in a perception sense, it's very serious about head knocks.
I think that's what a lot of this is. It is driven with a forward, a very forward-looking view to where the game is going to be in 10 to 20 years' time.
It's nice to see them thinking that way. I mean, I'm not PVL's biggest supporter, but I'm happy to see things like that being thought of, and people, whoever is giving him that advice, I think good on them. I think it can be a better game for those changes, because nobody enjoys seeing players writhing on the ground, convulsing after some big head knock, or if they do, they've got something wrong in their heads as far as I'm concerned. Yes, I enjoy a good hit. I enjoy a Steve Maddie sort of hit as much as anybody, but they've got to be done right, and they can be, as people like Maddie and Safua showed, but they consistently will do the big hits. Or Dean Farray is another good example. Nigel Plum, those guys did lots of the really big hits that they weren't getting penalised for it because they were doing it the right way. It can be done. You don't have to be a bloody thug like your Sam Thides, your Paul Gallons, your Sam
Josh Maguires,
your Felice Kafusis. There's too many players like that. Let's rub out the grubs, and then this won't be such an issue when you get people like that. When they're getting punished consistently, teams won't select them anymore, and that gets them out of the game.
Mario, you said before that you don't like the sight of players lying on the ground writhing in agony, but I put it to you, sir, what if it was Cameron Smith?
Writhing in agony, I'm totally fine with. Convulsing from a head knock, I would not be happy with.
Xander, do you agree, or are you pro-convulsing?
I mean, to be honest, whenever he's given an interview, it sounds to me like he's convulsing. But I think I'm with Mario on this one.
All right, guys, I think we've interrogated Magic Round enough. That was a really good chat, actually. Look, we'll just touch on a few final topics before we sign off and do some NRL trivia. Gear yourself up, get your neurons firing. But I wanted to talk about the expansion. Now, I think there are two groups that have come out over the last week and have officially put forward their bids to be that 17th team in the competition. I want to talk Firehawks, lads, and I don't know how intimately familiar you are with their bid, but has anyone seen their official launch yet?
Included some bullshit in there where they said, "Oh, it's a unique brand," just utterly ignoring that there's already a team in Australia called the Firehawks, not the rugby league, sure.
No, they're called the Firebirds. It's a netball team.
Oh, it is too. It's, the Queensland Firebirds, my bad. But still, it's effectively the same thing. But portraying themselves as being completely unique was a bit rich, I thought.
Well, look, I'll read you some of the statements, fellas, and I'll get your take on this. So this is what the club spokesman said today. Said, like the Firehawk, we are a unique Australian brand, as Mario said. We're a raptor that changes the environment for the better to sustain it. In what it does, it is representative of an outlaw. Our bold colours of black and orange pay homage to the history of Easts, while the blue and gold pay homage to our home city of Brisbane. Like the legendary Firehawk, a bird of prey, we are hunters, not cannibals. Now, these are quite fiery words. I'm enjoying this. But is it enough for a club to get an NRL license in terms of having to compare its sexual appetite to Jeffrey Dahmer? What does being a cannibal have to do anything, Xander?
So they're basically making the claim that even though they're based in Brisbane, they're not going to cannibalise the Broncos support, but they're going to be targeting new markets. It's the non-Broncos Brisbane market that they're searching for. And that's to try and bolster their claim, because the Dolphins are in that kind of southwest corridor, kind of between the Gold Coast and Brisbane. And they have more of a logical claim that they're not going to cannibalise the existing Queensland support base for the Broncos or the Titans, whereas it's a little bit less clear with East because they're nestled in Brisbane. So that's what that's about.
Well, I put it to you. I put it to you, Xander. It says that we're hunters, not cannibals. So that means they can still hunt the Brisbane Broncos.
Yeah.
They can
hunting
still
new territories and new people.
They can still kill them.
Not eating their own.
Exactly. They're just not devouring the team. I don't think there's enough of a distinction there, personally. But there wasn't.
It's a questionable choice of words. I think it's fair to say.
They can devour the Broncos. Good riddance to them.
Yeah, I think the Broncos are busy devouring themselves.
I was about to say. Yeah, that's right. They've been eating their own entrails for the last 2 years. Now, this also came out from the Firehawks that The club has a strong balance sheet. Apparently, it's got $80 million in assets and will operate from a $7.5 million community centre of excellence, which will commence construction in October 2021. And as you said, Xander, coming from the top, they said the club is actually focusing on attracting a new, younger audience with over 4.4 million casual sport fans between the ages of 18 to 34 who apparently don't currently support the Broncos or the Titans. Now, this is interesting. How would you guys define casual sports fan? Because that could just be someone that doesn't give a fuck about league, right?
It's a bit of a strange one, but I think it's more that there's probably a whole bunch of people up there that are disenfranchised Newtown Jets fans or just people who are NRL fans but they don't like the Broncos, and so they're sort of waiting for a team. And I do know of some such people who are, who've moved to Queensland and they were fans of the Bulldogs or whatever, but they've fallen out of love with them, but they'd be happy to jump onto a new brand, something they can, really, really feel like they're at the ground level of. So I'm sure there's going to be people like that. Whether or not there's enough to really make any decent numbers, at least the Dolphins might have some amount of dedicated fans that would come over.
When I was reading it on the weekend, I actually thought the Dolphins sounded like the stronger of the bids.
All right, sell Mario and I.
They seem. Well, it's a little bit, it's exactly what I've just said. Basically, I don't know how much more I can add to it, but they sit, more neatly between Brisbane and the Gold Coast, so that they do have a distinct identity, and they also do have an existing, infrastructure. They have their own stadium and agreements there where they're already well set up. They're also well financed. They don't have to worry about money. They've got financial backers and sponsors already to come on board, and they also have a strong sort of grassroots, player nursery, which the Firehawks also have with their association with these. So they're similar in that sense. But I think that of the two, they don't have to come up with I suppose cute phrases like "we're hunters, not cannibals," because it's clear. So yeah, if I had to choose, I'd probably go for the Dolphins.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I don't know. As an animal, dolphins are renowned rapists, so maybe their first signing will be Jared Hayne if it goes to Red.
But look, we're going to go to some NRL trivia, boys. Start with you, Mario. Don't panic. Which country went through the 2014 Rugby League Four Nations tournament undefeated?
Didn't the Kiwis win that one? So let's say New Zealand.
New Zealand is correct. Well done, Mario. You are off the mark.
Marshall Magic.
It was, yes, that's right. It was probably in the. I think he got the Golden Boot that year, didn't he? He was in prime form. All right, Xander, pressure's on. Over to you. Who was named as the NRL's Coach of the Year in 2014? Now, because it's a difficult one, I'm going to give you multiple choice. Was it Brian Smith?
Yep.
Was it Des Hasler? Or was it Ivan Cleary?
Oh, let me think about that. Brian Smith, Des Hasler, or Ivan Cleary?
The holy trinity of death.
I'm just trying to think. Well, Des had won the comp only a couple of years before, but they weren't, from memory, that crash hot in 2014. Brian Smith, who was he even coaching?
I was wondering that.
His niece's under 12 team.
Yeah, was he at the Eels at that point?
Mate, you can't ask the host questions. That's not how the quiz works.
All right. Well, Ivan Cleary. Ivan kicked off. He was really good at the start. I think he burst onto the scene and did pretty well from memory, and then had his slump.
Got tired.
They like to give it to an up and comer. I'm going to say it was given to Ivan Cleary.
Ivan Cleary is correct. Well done, Xander. It is one apiece.
He deserved it. He deserved it. That was the year they had the most, like a 2021 Roosters level of injury toll, and they still finished fourth from memory. And by the way, you said Manly didn't go well in 2014. We finished equal first with the Roosters.
I just remember us, being yet another minor premiership year for us. Manly just didn't register for me.
I mean, we were leading the entire year, and then we just failed. Anyway, let's move on.
Mario, in Xander's defense, he was actually referring to Anthony Watmough's legal cases, and they didn't go that well that year. So question 2, Mario, this is for you. Who was the first player to captain the Cronulla Sutherland Sharks?
Who gives a fuck?
I'll give you multiple choice. Was it Greg Ryan, Michael Porter, or Monty Porter?
I've never heard of any of them, but I know a Greg Ryan, so I'm just going to go with him.
It was not Greg Ryan, which gives you an opportunity to steal here, Xander.
So who are the other two?
Michael Porter or Monty Porter?
I like the name Monty. I'm going to go with Monty Porter.
Monty Porter is correct. Xander moves on the 2 points. Well played. I like the fact you could win this game by just liking the name Monty. That's what's brilliant about this game. All right, Xander. Which Canberra Raiders player passed the milestone of 200 games and 1,500 points for the club during 2017?
Oh, for God's sake, everyone knows that one.
Oh, I don't. Let's see. 2017. I realized I should know this one because I remember this at the time being announced. It's just really frustrating.
I'll give you a clue. I'll give you a clue, mate.
No!
It's not Marshall Chalk.
No clue.
Oh, good. That's helpful.
Or Brett Mullins.
Yeah, so I'm trying
Okay, I'll give you one more
to
clue.
think if it was relevant.
It's not Heath Lestrange.
He played for Canberra?
No, he never did. That's the throwaway, Mario. That's the brilliance.
Fair enough.
5 seconds, Xander. 5, 4, 3, 2.
Mick Croker.
Jared.
What did you say?
Mick Croker. Jared, I said Mick Croker. Fuck, I meant Jared Croker.
Okay.
Mick Croker's been retired for ages.
It was not Mick Croker. So, Mario, the answer was?
It was Jared, of course.
Jared Croker, indeed. I thought for a second there, Xander,
I knew it was a croaker.
I thought you said McCroker, like it was some Scottish Hebrew legend.
I was like, I was thinking to myself, it was probably Jared Croker, and then for some reason my head went to Mick Croker. Which, yeah. Anyway,
I mean, for a start, his name was Mick Crocker. You can't even get his name right.
I used to call him Croker.
Fair enough.
All right, Mario.
After what happened in 2004.
This is for the win, mate. Okay. Who was the NRL's top try scorer in 2017? Was it? You get multiple choice. Yeah, you do. You get multiple choice. Was it Alex Johnston? Was it Suasali Vunivalu? Or was it Semi Radradra?
Oh, Jesus.
That's a very good options. That's a tough question, mate. Good luck with it.
Oh. I have a feeling it was Goonie Gugu.
That's none of them.
Gugu.
Vunivalu, it's his nickname.
2017, the giant year for the Storm. It was Vunivalu. Congratulations, Mario. You have won NRL Malaysian style trivia, NRL trivia box, which you need to shorten that name down. But well done, mate. You've won 3-2. Bad luck, Xander. It was close. If only Mick Croker was the try scoring machine, or Mick Croker, then you would have won. But that was fun, boys. I enjoyed that. Do we have any closing comments for the listeners? Anything you want to vent about before we go?
Yeah, don't watch Channel 9. They just employed Cam Smith, but fuck Channel 9.
Listeners, thank you very much for tuning in again to TVT. We will be back, probably not next week, let's be honest, maybe in about 3.5 weeks' time. Until then, enjoy yourself. On the count of 3, you have to name your best new Queensland team that isn't one of the franchises, okay?
Rednecks.
The Rednecks, Xander?
Inbreds.
The Inbreds. And I've got the deep-fried Pauline Hansons. For obvious reasons, she was a fish and chip owner before she became a mainstream racist. Which club deserves to be in the NRL competition? I need your elevator pitch. Xander, go for it.
pretty simple. The inbreds should be there because, look, nobody produces their own like a bunch of inbreds, and they'll have a playing talent that will be genetically inferior, but there'll be plenty of them because they'll always have another cousin to marry.
I like it. What about you, Mario?
I'm concerned that all three of our options are actually exactly the same as each other, but if we must find something...
There's a thematic connection, isn't there?
Yeah, if there must be a differentiation of some sort, I'm going to say that the rednecks are, they're all Trump supporters, and nothing stops them from winning, even losing. So no matter what, they've still won in their minds. So my team will always win, whether they lose or not.
The deep-fried Pauline Hanson's, you got yourself a hell of a mascot. It would be a giant inflatable red-haired crazy lady who would just sort of yell racist obscenities at the crowd, but obviously not the white members of the crowd, just the brown visitors. And I think as a bit of a twist with my team, the halfback would always have a deep-fried penis. It's a ceremony that would be held before the game. Canberra had the Viking clap. Instead, the deep-fried Pauline Hanson's halfback would have to dip his Roger into a vat of boiling oil.